So what we're going to do first is we'll just introduce ourselves, and then my dad will give some background about himself and about how he developed the concept, which we have a small nonprofit organization, and we call it Holigent.org. And then I'll explain what exactly is our concept. Then my dad will just explain our brief plan of action, and then we would love to hear your questions and open it up for discussion. So first of all, again, my name is Elisa, and I was born in Los Angeles. I grew up here. I attended UCLA. I was fortunate enough to receive my BA there in Geography and Environmental Studies. Then I moved to Santa Barbara for a few years and got my MA there in Geography with an emphasis on human-environment relations. So I'm very passionate about social issues, economic, environmental. And when I finished school, I realized that my big goal was to help create a sustainable society. And I realized that's exactly what my dad was already working on. So that worked out nicely. I moved back to LA recently to start working more closely with him and get involved with Occupy LA. And eventually we ended up here. So go ahead with your background.
And she gets a big paycheck from Holigent, $1 a year. And so do I. It's not about money. My name is Nicholas Frank, and I'm gonna. First of all, I'm gonna take you way outside the box. Enjoy the ride. I'm gonna start with my father just a few seconds because he started it all back in the 1930s during the Great Depression. I lost him when I was 4 years old, but got to know him well through a book manuscript that he left behind. And it's about social evolution. He had an early dream of the United Europe. I was born in 1937 in Budapest, Hungary. Survived Nazism and World War II. Grew up in mindless and murderous communism. Survived the '56 uprising where kids were dropping around me. Escaped communist Hungary through the Iron Curtain, 1956. Lived in Canada, Montreal, a few years, and came to Los Angeles in 1963. In looking back, I was weighed down with the memories of my upbringing and the unanswered, big baggage of heavy unanswered questions. So affecting my health, and in 1972 I decided to, in a late evening walk, to make it a project to answer as many of the unanswered questions as I possibly can, figure out how life works, how life should work. And so this will be the year that I've been doing this for 40 years. I may be a slow worker, or it's been an interesting and difficult project. I divide this 40 years in roughly 3 segments. The first 10 years I spent with understanding stress, which is the human psychophysiological arousal. It's essentially our survival mechanism, but too much of it is, of course, detrimental. The middle, about 20 years, I spent with the idea of synergy. And the last 10 years with the idea of Holigent. I give you just a little bit in each of these segments. Stress is very important because, number one, it's a factor in almost all the illnesses that we have, from the common cold to heart disease and cancer. But also, it factors in about human behavior, individual behavior, how we behave, anger. The important thing to remember stress, that high stress diminishes rational thought process. It may be an evolutionary thing when in the evolutionary jungle, fast, reflexive action had a higher survival value than thought processing. And then you can take this idea all the way to understand that wars are not caused by the failure of diplomacy, more likely high collective socio-economic stress. It's kind of an interesting idea. So from that you can interpolate that if we are really to stop wars and create an infrastructure of peace, maybe we have to start with securing quality of life. As long as your quality of life is there, your stress level will be checked. So that's just one item. At the end of that period of the first 10 years working with stress, I came to understand that just stress will not answer my big question. How do we make life work in a productive, peaceful way? And so I did a bit of a crazy thing. We packed up my family, we rented out our home, paid for the whole trip, and went to Europe. I needed to get out of my windowless garage office and just get some fresh air and think about what's beyond stress, what's going to answer this big question, how to make life work in a larger sense, not just the personal. So we spent about an old VWA camper, and hitched to it an old trailer home. And so we scooted around Europe for a year and a half. Elisa was about 2 years old.
So I don't remember anything.
Don't tell me she doesn't remember a thing. I basically spent the time just thinking, reading, writing, and long, long walks. It was productive, but because by the time we came back, I had an idea and direction, and it was to find out what's beyond stress, what's the more important thing that I needed to work with, and that was essentially how complex systems work, how complex socio-economic systems work. And so I ran into this big book, Buckminster Fuller, Synergetics. And he has written many books, I read most of them. And so synergy was a very interesting concept because it does deal with the idea of how bits and pieces, parts work together to create the more than the sum of the parts. So that was interesting. I spent a lot of time on that. 2 books, they're both biosynergy and then socio-economic synergism. They're out of print, don't look for it. But it was a great learning experience. However, at the end of the synergies period, there was still something missing. And what was missing is, I needed to, first of all, I looked around to look for a system to create a sustainable, peaceful, just socio-economic operating system. And the history of human organizational systems, you go back to feudalism and all the isms, all the way to here, capitalism. And you know that it's a dismal history. There's nothing there that we can use. So I had no option but to go outside of everything we know and looked around. Where is a sustainable organizational system? And it was right in front of our face. It's nature. It's cosmic evolutionary self-organization. Evolution is not just life. Evolution started at the very beginning of the universe. Simple matter to complex matter to organic matter to simple life to complex life, and then us. It's a continuum. Nature doesn't compartmentalize. So, so the challenge then was, but it's not science. It's what underlies science. It's a conceptual self-organizing mechanism. That was a challenge. Science doesn't deal with it because it's really not material. It's concept. It's a qualitative thing. Weightless. You can't weigh and measure it. Therefore, you can't put it into a mathematical formula. Science can't deal with that. So at that point, I realized I was on my own. It was rough. My wife checked me into the emergency department one night. I thought I had a heart attack. It was just a stress attack, but I got over it. What was difficult is that unlike scientists who have peers and support systems, I had none of that. So to think that I got it right and the rest of the world is crazy, that was difficult. So there was years of anxiety and searching to justify, to prove, to anchor these thoughts into something that's solid. So at the end of the synergy period, I needed a new concept, and that was the concept of Holigent. Modeling natural evolutionary self-organization in a way that it's formalized, and then on that model we can develop a socio-economic organizational, or rather self-organizational system that is sustainable, that creates social, economic justice and environmental sustainability. It's a tall order, but you'll be amazed once you understand that nature can take care of things. If you don't compartmentalize, everything falls into place, everything works seamlessly. So this last 10 year or so, I'm checking, was the period of Holigent. It is a socio-economic self-organizational system. Elisa will give you a little rundown on what it is, and then we can talk about it, question and answers. But this, I know I've served through 7 decades in about 7, that's more than 7 minutes, and there'll be a lot of questions, and we'll be glad to entertain those questions. So for now, Elisa will tell you a little rundown of what it is, what is Holigent, and then we'll talk about the other stuff.
So the practical aspect is, how do you translate all those years of thought and theories and concepts into something practical to create a sustainable society in that very comprehensive sense? So the concept that we came up with, or mostly my dad came up with, and I'm helping to fine-tune, is pairing a compact, sustainable, car-free urban community with a very specific local hybrid socioeconomic arrangement. So in that arrangement, you retain only the good aspects of capitalism, such as individual expression, motivation, creativity, that kind of thing. But alongside a non-monetary means of value exchange in the form of community service. So if you were a resident of one of these communities, you would live there, you would work there, meaning you would not have 2-hour commute to get to work, and instead with that extra time that you have, you would commit to a certain number of hours of community service in your community every week or every month. And for that work, you would earn credit. And you could directly apply that credit to pay for part of your housing. And the amount of time that you put into community service, the amount of credit you earn, could vary depending on broader economic conditions. So if there were a recession, a depression, things weren't going so well, you could, or if you couldn't be paid as much, or if you lost your job, you would have a backup system, another means to keep your housing, keep your, secure your quality of life, regardless of what the economy is doing. You would just put more work, more of your time into community service, earn more credit. You could pay all of your rent with that credit. If it gets really bad, you could pay for food and basic needs with that. So it reduces a lot of vulnerability. It gives you a backup system. You're not totally dependent on your job and your monetary income. And I see it also as a means of facilitating a shift in philosophy, taking it from a focus on value and wealth equals money and stuff to value and wealth equals quality of life and quality of personal relationships. So I think that's also very important. And also each of these communities would be nonprofit. So they would be managed by nonprofit organizations, and all the commercial and residential rental income that they generate would be reinvested directly into the community. So that money would go to underwrite these socioeconomic arrangements between the residents, and would go to fund things like outreach programs for surrounding communities, affordable education, which obviously we know education is so critical and it's suffering so much right now, which makes no sense to me at all. So, like my dad said, our inspiration, our model is coming from the way that natural systems are organized and the way that they function. So, as demand grew, ideally we build, as soon as possible, build one of these demonstration community paired with this type of economic arrangement. And as demand grew for a similar living arrangement, way of life, it wouldn't sprawl. Instead, you would build another one, and they would create networks on larger and larger scales. So sort of cellular networks, mutually supportive, largely self-organized and self-sustained. And as they grew on larger scales, their benefits would increase. You would have less and less dependence and demand for resources, less need for oil. You would have increased socioeconomic security, less demand on government. This vertical structure that we have now has become much more horizontal. So the people would have a lot more power in their communities and a lot more say in their own well-being. So in my concluding my part, I feel like we can't afford to see solutions like this as futuristic dreams. I feel like we have to seize them and make them reality as soon as possible so that we and future generations have a secure possibility of a bright future. So we're open, with open arms, we're welcoming collaboration, participation from occupiers. We're interested in connecting with student organizations, with educational institutions. So my dad is going to explain kind of our current plan of action.
Yes, so Elisa is right. Essentially, we are in a race against time, and that's all of humanity, for reasons you know. A race against time. So yes, we have a plan to get this going as soon as possible. In fact, we're going to start our college tour within days or a week or so. Kids are back from holiday. Um, the purpose, number one purpose is that we want to plan this out. We're not sure if this is going to get off the ground anytime soon, and you'll find out why in a minute. So it may happen, decades from now. So we want to plant the seed of this idea in young minds on college campuses. In addition to that, we're going to visit educational institutions, their administration, their the teachers, professors, spread this idea. We would like to, well, first of all, let me say this, we're inviting the Occupy movement to participate in this. And so our idea is that creating synergies and leverages by pooling our resources, Occupy, Holigent, student groups, and educational institutions. And you have that little cartoon I created, the synergies and leverages. As Archimedes said, give me a place to stand, and with a lever I will move the world. We're not choosing that. Leverage is a very, very important thing. So are synergies. So if we can create those synergies and leverages, each of us together, Occupy, Holigent, students, educational institutions, we're going to move that big rock, see what's under it. And if there's some money under it, we're going to need that money, because to build the first sort of prototype demonstration Holigent urban village, we're going to need a lot of money, because we don't want to borrow from banks. We don't want to borrow, period. Because if it's funded up front, we're not going to have a mortgage, we're not going to have stockholders, we're not going to have profit distribution. It's managed by a nonprofit. All the income, this is one of the few ideas of nonprofit that will generate its substantial income perpetually. So it will be self-sustaining, self-financed. There'll be a lot of money to underwrite this socioeconomic quality of life guarantee, as well as affordable education and health and so forth. So yes, we're going to be targeting the 1%. And there is a number of ways we're doing this. We've already sent out about 100 letters and proposals, just sort of an introduction to the billionaires from top down. Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, George Soros, and all that. Most of it will end up in waste baskets, or best in some drawers that nobody will ever look at, but that's not, we're going to keep on doing this. So that's the front door. The back door is, we'll try every which way. And we have some ideas in how to leverage this if we get together, this group, how to leverage it, invite the media to amplify this message, and march up, let's say UCLA, all right, march up on Westwood Boulevard, and I have some ideas, and we'll welcome other ideas if the Occupy movement is interested. This would be not a protest, but a proposal for solution. So we'll be solutioneers. Perhaps the front row dressed in business suit and so forth and ties, to show the world and media that we mean business. This is not a protest, this is solution. So one of our proposal or suggestion is that, and it may start here at Occupy Venice, so the Occupy movement develop an alternate arm or fist, so that yes, you need to continue the protest. It's very important, but with protest and solution. I had two fists, a powerful 1-2. If you miss one, the other one is still coming. And right there, you can begin to create synergies. So the idea of getting the focusing on at least in this first run, focusing on educational institutions and students. Well, first of all, we know that education is the foundation, the cornerstone of civilization. We have to do that. Large, major educational institutions do have established fundraising channels. In the paper, LA Times, USC just starting a fundraising event. Their goal is $6 billion. $6 billion, we can build half a dozen compact Holigent urban villages. We just need to build one to begin with to demonstrate all the good stuff that it can create. So we're going to be tabling and talking to and speaking and talking to students on college campuses. We're going to start with the area here and go from San Diego to Berkeley and through California. We'll see what happens. We're planning to go across the country, eventually end up in Washington, D.C. and present hard copies of our proposal to the White House and Congress people. But here's the thing about working with students. If we get students on our side, because we're proposing affordable education, a rational avenue, we're not only going to get students, we're going to get their parents. And in addition to that, we're going to get all the people that work for the educators and all the people that work for educational institutions. So we're broadening our base. Not only that, we can go further. I do my own little, questioning people, aside of listening to those talking heads. What do you think about the Occupy movement? And just as we had a little bit of a fairly good percentage of people that I talked to, it mirrors the statistics. A lot of the 99%ers are sitting on the fence. The fact is that large percent, well, 90% of 99%ers, they still have a job, they have a roof over their head, and they're worried. They don't want anybody to rock the boat, so they're sitting on the fence. If the Occupy movement comes in now with not just protest, but solution, alternate solution, I think those fence sitters will come down off the fence on our side. So now that you have this enlarged group, students, parents, educators, you have a bulk of the population where you can promote your agenda, the protest and whatever you want to achieve through acts of Congress. The alternate solution that we're proposing is a solution that does not require an act of Congress. In other words, we want to bring in the 1%ers, as many as we can, to fund this project. And once the project is built, we'll demonstrate it, and we are very, very certain that it's going to be a winner. If you have questions about that, we can talk. But that's the idea, to have protest and solutions and create these synergies and leverages. And I suppose we go into anything else.
What struck me first when I was exposed to the Holigent concept stuff And the way I explain it was that, when we saw the movie Zeitgeist Addendum, it's easy for me to kind of understand Holigent when I realize that the Zeitgeist philosophy that's kind of driving a lot of what motivates folks about this, removing a monetized economy and replacing with a resource-based economy. Foreclosed homes sitting empty, hundreds of thousands of homeless people. It's kind of a simple approach to managing our affairs when we have infinite demand and finite resources. That's the crux of the problem on the planet Earth. And I think as a philosophy, it's a really compelling kind of driving force behind a lot of what you see like Global Green doing in New Orleans, where you have practical, on-the-ground, real-world examples of what I consider to be something that dovetails very closely with what Holigent proposes on a much more limited scale. But if you see what Global Green's doing to rebuild New Orleans with green building and with neighborhood development and sustainable systems and synergies that are driving this kind of collaborative, community-driven approach to rebuilding, that's what struck me as a very compelling kind of overlap with what it is you guys are proposing, what you guys have been trying to communicate to the public and that you'll be doing to the schools. So anyway, just for what it's worth, I think it really drives home the Zeitgeist thing for me in a lot of ways. It's like you take Zeitgeist, it's like, well, how do you ground that in your daily reality? Besides getting rid of the Fed and getting rid of your money and then incorporating community currency as well. Kind of the planned living, again, eco-village crossed with much more deeper philosophical kind of communal approach to how to survive on the planet collectively with 7 billion people. So,
if I just throw this in, yes, our long-range major focus is sustainability. And if you wanted to put in this philosophy into a single sentence, it's do the essential most with the least